Order, order. Before I call the Honourable Member for Warrington South to move the motion, I would like to inform members that the Parliamentary Digital Communications team will be conducting secondary filming during today's debate for their series of procedural explainers. Order. I will call Andy Carter to move the motion, and I will then call the Minister to respond. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention for the 30-minute debates. Order, order. Andy Carter to move the motion.
Mr Rosendale, thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and can I also thank the Backbench Business Committee for facilitating this debate today. This morning, I want to talk about a subject which has impacted almost all of us at some point or another, or will do in the future: grief. In particular, the grief experienced from bereavement of a parent. Now, grief is unique. It is both an experience and an emotion, and it comes in many forms, whether it be the loss of a family member, a friend, a colleague, or even a beloved pet. In fact, the only commonality shared between people when they grieve is the pure uniqueness of that experience. And I, like many of my colleagues, know that it is difficult when you lose a parent, to say the least. It is something we will all experience, no doubt, in our lives, so can only hope and pray that it comes later rather than sooner. However, tragically, for some people, that isn't the case. They lose their mum or dad during childhood, and that's the area today I want to focus on in this debate. Bereavement is a complex challenge. It's a complex challenge to navigate at any stage in life, but to go through it during childhood has its own unique challenges. The raw wound of loss carries a heavy burden, and we must ensure that it's handled with delicacy and in a manner which best suits a grieving child. I'm very happy to give way to the honourable gentleman.
Forward this issue to Westminster Hall. It's certainly an issue which we're all affected with, and all will be affected with as well. Is the honourable member aware that the voluntary Bernardo's advice line is available between Monday and Tuesday from 10 to 1 and Fridays from 10 to 12:30, which is for adults concerned about bereaved children, and which we thank Bernardo's as a charity for setting this up. However, the help line for bereaved children does not go far enough, and the government, I think is what the honourable gentleman will be asked for, government through the Education NHS must also set up a statutory body to be in place for permanent accessible support without having to search it out. Thank you.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for Strangford for highlighting the work that many charities do, and he's absolutely right. I'm going to come on to that point very shortly indeed. I want to put in some context first. The Child Bereavement Network provides statistics on the number of children bereaved of a parent every year, and it currently sits at about 46,000 annually. To put that into context, it equates to a young person every 20 minutes being bereaved of a parent. But we know this figure is inaccurate, and we've tried to estimate the number of bereaved children because grief can come with so many types of loss. And this only applies to children who've lost their parents. Yet, crucially, we lack the statistics that charities and service providers need to ensure that bereavement support networks, schools and professionals can support children who are affected. Very happy to give way.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted the honourable member has brought this subject forward because, as he probably knows, it's something that's very close to my heart and I've been doing a lot of work in. And those figures that he brings up are, if you like, the tip of the iceberg with the problem. Because although we know that there are children who are bereaved every day, we don't know where they are, and the charities don't know how to get in touch with them. So that is why I've brought forward a private member's bill, which would create a protocol for putting children in touch with organisations and vice versa. Does the honourable member think that's something he can support?
I'm very grateful for my honourable friend's intervention, and I pay tribute to the work that she's done with honourable colleagues in her private member's bill. And absolutely, I support the aims of the bill, and I will come on to talk a little bit more about the bill in just a second. Mr. Rosendale, the reason behind this debate today is largely down to the experience of one young man called Dan Walsh, who I'm very pleased to say is able to join us here in the chamber today with his friend Finn and his teacher Alice. Now, Dan is currently studying at Priestley College in my Warrington South constituency, and I had the pleasure of first meeting him a few months ago during a visit there. He told me the heartwarming account of his own experience with loss, the way it had impacted him and his family, and how not only he overcame this terrible and tragic event at such a young age, but how it has empowered him to become involved in campaigning to help others who sadly find themselves in the same position. And I'd like to share his account in a speech that he has written for this debate. Dan writes, "Nearly 5 years ago today, I lost my father to a shock brain aneurysm. He was a fit and healthy man and had absolutely no warning of what was to come. At the time, I was 12 and in year 7, and little did I know when I left school for school that day, my life was about to change forever in a way that I could never have anticipated. The journey that followed was rough. My world had turned upside down, and at 12, I struggled to grasp the permanence of death. I let the guilt and anger consume and stop me from being able to properly process his passing. And throughout that difficult time, I was reminded constantly that I wasn't alone. My own family and school always made sure that I knew they would always be there. Yet it was that point when I felt most alone." Mark Lemon, an author, captured this feeling brilliantly when he wrote, "Grief is feeling lonely in a room full of people." And I knew full well that I was supported by loving and caring people, but nothing could ever stop me from feeling so isolated. Nothing anyone could do would ever make me feel any different.
Would my honourable friend give way?
I'm very happy to give way.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank my honourable friend for bringing this speech to the House, and also to your constituent. It's very brave for him to do this. Now, my own son Clifford was just 5 years old when he lost his beloved Nana, my mum Valerie, and she was like a second mum to him. And then a few months later, he lost his dog as well. Now, we got through it with faith. Does my honourable friend agree that the church has an important place in helping with this, but also that schools need more guidance on how to spot if a child is grieving and also understanding the stages of grief?
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for Maureen Atwood for raising the point, and particularly around the role that the church can play in supporting families. And I say to anybody going through grief, that there are people out there that you can reach to. The challenge is knowing where to reach. And I think the whole debate today is about helping people to find those places where you can go at the time when you need support. I'm going to return to the speech that was written by Dan. It was a cruel realisation, but necessary. It allowed me to begin the process of healing, because grief is a bittersweet feeling. Whilst you're suffering your own loss, you get to share others' love and compassion for the person that you lose. And after months of not being able to cope and agonising over the loss, I was finally directed to a charity called Child Bereavement UK. The months following my dad's death, I experienced a communication breakdown. I was unable to talk about him and felt completely overwhelmed. I sought relief in my own solitude, but to no avail, feeling trapped in a sensation of anguish. The charity then became a lifeline for me. It was the only place where I could feel safe to express my own feelings, and where I was able to begin the complex journey of navigating through that emotion. What counselling did for me was allow me to talk openly and freely about my dad. However, the most helpful aspect of my time at Child Bereavement was the group meetings where I could speak to young people who'd also been through what I'd been through. The group offered comforting presence, and with their guidance, I was able to acknowledge my own feelings of grief. It gave me the opportunity to talk about my own experiences, but also to console those who'd had similar experiences, and in doing so, it created a sense of solidarity between myself and other grieving young people. I had one particular issue with first attending Child Bereavement, and that was not being able to comfortably talk about my dad openly. For months, I'd suppressed my own feelings, but now I cherish the moment that I had with him, and I'm always keen to listen to the impact that he had on everybody else. I would go once a month for one-to-one sessions and a group for young people. Yet, after 3 months, I felt comfortable talking about the memories that I built with my dad and the struggles that followed. Looking back at this time, it gives me great self-pride to be able to talk about my own experiences openly and to know that to have been able to do that, I overcame the most painful time in my life. No one should ever face this journey alone, and having experienced this firsthand, I feel an obligation to make sure that young people bereaved across the country have the accessibility to the services and are able to secure the level of support that I did. Now, Dan is only 17 years old, and he tells a story which is all too common for people of his age. Too many young people are unable to access what they need. As the Honourable Member for Edinburgh West said in her intervention, for those that do lose a loved one, it's imperative that they know they're not alone and they know where to turn. Very happy to give way.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way and for sharing such powerful testimony from his constituent, which I think really showed the bravery of that young person, not just getting through this, but sharing his experience to motivate change too. I'm privileged to be able to work with some fantastic kinship carers in my constituency who look after young people who've gone through real trauma and often very deep bereavement. But currently, the Adoption Support Fund, which provides access to therapeutic care, isn't always something they're able to access to if their young person hasn't been formally through the care system. Would the Honourable Member agree that removing the looked after status requirement from the fund would be one powerful way to ensure every young person can access the therapeutic support they might need?
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Member for Mid-Bedfordshire for that intervention. He takes one of the asks that I was going to put to the Minister and does it eloquently, so I'm very grateful for that intervention. The issues that the speech provoked from Dan that I read a few moments ago allow me to make one or two requests to the Minister. So I wish to ask the Minister if he could look at the steps the government can take to ensure that the collection and release of much-needed data on children who've lost loved ones is something that he can consider and work through a process to help bereavement support practices. I know the Department for Education responded to an e-petition last October which called for proper record to be kept on the number of bereaved children to ensure they are supported, the gist of which focused on responsibility falling to the General Register Office, who oversee recording of deaths. And I'd be grateful if the Minister could expand on this and look into what other routes may be available for recording information separate from death registration by His Majesty's Passport Office. I'd also be grateful if he could comment on what further steps the government is taking to ensure that young people unaware of the support services being offered are properly informed where they can go to seek help and to get advice. It cannot be beyond government with today's technology to be able to reach out to young people at the time when they perhaps feel most lost and to ensure that those supporting them, those around them and looking after them, can give them that guidance at the time when they need it. And to that end, I'd be grateful if he could outline what consideration the government has given to the provisions in my honourable friend, the Member for Edinburgh West Private Members Bill, to expand the requirements for specified organisations and public bodies to inform young people of the local, national and online support services available to them following a bereavement. I'm incredibly grateful to my honourable friend, the Minister, for being here to respond to this debate today. I couldn't have asked for a better Minister to take up this debate. And I'm also very grateful that he spent time with Dan just before this debate today. Can I also thank colleagues that have attended this debate today, particularly the Honourable Member for Edinburgh West, who has been a real champion in this area, and I'm very happy to support her private members' bill. And can I pay particular tribute to the many brilliant campaigners that have, and charities that have been mentioned by members in this debate today, who do so much to support young people who experience bereavement at any age, and nobody should go through bereavement alone. Finally, can I congratulate and pay tribute to Dan Walsh, who I met and he talked to me about the very deeply personal experience that He showed great maturity. And in that conversation, he talked to me about his interest in politics. He's studying politics at Priestley College. So I asked him to write this speech, which he did. I know his dad will be incredibly proud. And I encourage him to continue to pursue his political ambitions, because I think he'll go a long way.
David Johnston.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosendale. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And can I thank the honourable member for Warrington South for securing a debate on this important topic. It's typical of him to bring such an important and sensitive topic to this House. I'm delighted that he's been joined by his constituent, Dan from Priestley College, who wrote a considerable portion of the honourable member's opening speech. It was an excellent speech. He might like to start writing some other speeches of colleagues, perhaps myself included. And I want to thank him for his courage in bringing his own story forward. We did have a chat before the debate alongside his friend Finn, and Dan spoke movingly about his experience, and he should be very proud of the way that he's sought to bring what has been a very sad experience for him to this place to help other young people experiencing grief, and he should also be very pleased to have a friend like Finn as well. We will all experience a bereavement at some point in our lives, and it can be most devastating for children and young people because it's not the order we expect life to go in. And just as bereavement touches us all, we all have a role to play in how we support the bereaved. We've got a responsibility, government, parliamentarians, schools, health professionals, and voluntary and charitable organisations, and everybody really, to ensure that children and young people can access the support they need when they need it. Responsibility for bereavement sits across different government departments, so and that includes the Department for Health and Social Care, but I will obviously focus on the work of the Department for Education today. What I will say is that the Department for Health and Social Care is continuing its work to address the recommendations that were in the Bereavement is Everyone's Business report from the UK Commission on Bereavement. And following that, we established a cross-government group with representatives from over 10 departments to improve bereavement support and ensure better joined-up work across government. And we'll keep working with that commission and the voluntary sector, including the Childhood Bereavement Network, to explore how their findings could inform policy. Schools and colleges, which I will focus on most, given that I am a minister for the Department for Education, they play a key role, clearly, in supporting children, including through difficult times, and we're very grateful for the vital pastoral support played by head teachers and staff. And although we can't expect those staff to be mental health, bereavement, or trauma specialists, they do know their pupils best, and they're well placed to determine the pastoral support that they might need. And to support them, we are offering all schools and colleges a grant to train a senior mental health lead to help them put informed support in place, drawing on specialists where it is needed. And more than 16,700 schools and colleges have now received a senior mental health lead training grant, including more than 8 in 10 state-funded secondary schools. In addition, we announced 1.3 billion recovery premium funding for schools, which on top of pupil premium can be used to deliver evidence-based approaches to support pupil mental health and well-being. And this can include counselling or other therapeutic services. We've also been rolling out mental health support teams in schools across the country, and they offer children experiencing common mental health issues such as anxiety and low mood, and try to facilitate smoother access to external specialist support. And as of April just gone, these covered 44% of pupils in schools and students in further education in England, and we're extending the coverage to reach at least 50% of pupils by March 2025. More broadly, we're providing record levels of investment in increasing the mental health workforce to expand and transform NHS mental health services in England. And the NHS forecasts that since 2019, spending on mental health services has increased by 4.7 billion in cash terms, compared to the aim of 3.4 billion that was in the NHS long-term plan. And 345,000 more children and young people will have access to mental health support by March 2025. What's taught through the school curriculum is clearly important too, and through the mental well-being topic of health education, pupils are taught a range of content relevant to dealing with bereavement. This includes recognising and talking about their emotions and how to judge whether what they are feeling and how they're behaving is normal. It's important young people know where and how to seek support, including whom in school they should speak to if they are worried about their own or someone else's mental well-being. In addition, last week we published our revised RSHE statutory guidance for consultation, which specifically includes bereavement. The guidance sets out that all pupils should know that change and loss, including bereavement, can provoke a range of feelings, that grief is a natural response to bereavement, and that everyone grieves differently. This is designed to enable schools to deal sensitively with the individual needs of their pupils, and we're grateful for the support we've had from charities such as the Childhood Bereavement Network and the Anna Freud Centre in developing the guidance. And Dan, before this debate, told me how helpful he had found the support from Child Bereavement UK, so they should be commended for that. I appreciate that young people like Dan, Finn and his classmates, along with thousands of their contemporaries across the country, are currently in the midst of exam season, and where bereavement has the potential to affect a pupil's ability to attend exams, the department has published guidance, including examples of effective practice to support these students. And regular attendance at schools and colleges is of course crucial to both the development and well-being of children and young people. And bereaved pupils need time to grieve and may understandably find it harder than others to attend. Schools and colleges should work with pupils, parents and carers to remove any barriers to attendance and work together to put the right support in place. This should include having sensitive conversations and developing good support, considering whether additional help from external partners, including the local authority or health services, would be appropriate. Now, just to talk about the collection of data, because Dan and I and Finn had a good conversation about this earlier, and my honourable friend is quite right that the member for Edinburgh West has been doing a huge amount in this area. And I think we continue to talk to the member for Edinburgh West and others about what exactly to do regarding data collection here, because candidly, in one sense, the most simple way to know the children that have been affected by bereavement is for it to be recorded on the death certificate. But we have a significant concern, as I was explaining to Dan, that anybody can buy a death certificate. And therefore, that information about who the children were in the case of the death is therefore accessible to everybody, which has potential negative consequences, which we do not necessarily want to facilitate, and we may find that causes other problems. We are, so in response to my honourable friend bringing this debate, I have had a conversation with officials about whether we might do something on the school census, to add a question on the school census regarding children that have been bereaved. Now, of course, that partly requires schools to know. So we recently added a question about young carers, and that's been helpful to understand, begin to understand how many children are young carers. And that was something that charities supporting young carers have wanted for some time. And so I'm happy to commit today that we will explore whether that is appropriate to do in the case of bereaved children. I will.
I'm very grateful for that commitment. That's Very much appreciated. My experience of registering a death, when you go to the registrar, you fill in some forms and you're able to record a number of details. But you don't receive a great deal back. And I wonder if the Minister would consider also exploring opportunities for registrars in county council areas, unitary authority areas, to provide people with information at the point where they register a death, where a parent is bereaved and a child is acknowledged in that process. Rather than recording, I understand the points he makes, recording on a death certificate, but a process at which something could be handed over at that point.
I think my honourable friend makes an excellent point, and I'm happy to have that discussion with my colleagues in other government departments about whether something like that might be feasible. I think one of the things we're keen to ensure, and again I had this conversation with Dan and Finn beforehand, is we've got to balance the need to ensure children and young people have that support against the fact that some may not want certain people to know what has happened, including their schools and teachers. And we may feel it's better if their schools and teachers know, but it may be the case that for a whole host of reasons, it may not be something that they want known or to have to discuss. But I'm happy to take that away and discuss that with my government colleagues. I will.
I thank the Minister very much for giving me further to that point. There is no need, I would agree that perhaps there's no need to put the information actually on the death certificate. But also when it comes to the school census, very often children will have moved from one parent to another if they were separated, or to their grandparents' home. And so the school has no way of knowing. So it would be useful, A, to inform the schools, but also we then have to take into account GDPR. So it might not be as easy as the schools being able to tell people, but if the person responsible for recording the death was able to set the whole thing in motion, it might be easier. Does that make sense?
I think the Honourable Lady makes a good and important point. These things always have considerable practical challenges to them, so they are often simpler than in how they sound than actually making them happen. But we will certainly see what is possible to do in this area, given the constraints that she has herself identified. To close, I'd like to again thank the Honourable Member for Warrington South for securing this debate. Children and young people who lose someone close to them deserve all the support, help and love that they can get. Nobody experiences grief in the same way, but we always want to consider how we can best support children and young people in the toughest of circumstances. And where support is needed, the government is committed to ensuring that this is available and accessible. Finally, and most importantly, I'd like to thank and pay tribute to Dan for bringing about today's debate. It's not often someone of his age secures a debate in Parliament, and I'm very impressed by the work he's done to turn his very difficult experience into positive change for young people like him.
The question is that this House has considered support for bereaved children. As many as other opinions say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.
The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended.